For so many years, people of all ages have been constructing cabin cruisers, yachts and sailboats, skiffs, runabouts, rowboats, and my favorite, racing hydros. What is fascinating, though, in all of this is that most of these watercraft were all designed by one naval architect who published these plans in a variety of do-it-yourself magazines. This man was William Jackson, whose brilliant design simplicity captivated the hearts and minds of the everyman and demystified the art of the boat building process. Jackson's career ended far too soon when he passed away in 1973 at the age of 66, but his legacy continues to flourish as people of all ages and lifestyles discover just how easy it is to build their own boat. Hello, my name's Chris Taylor, CEO and co-founder of Muskoka Seaflea, and I am proud to present our documentary on William D. Jackson. Enjoy.
William D. Jackson was interested in boats from a very early age. His father, William C. Jackson, built boats, his grandfather was a shipbuilder in England, and his great-grandfather built ships in Russia. William was born in Marion, Indiana in 1906, where he lived with his mother, father, and two older sisters. He lived in Marion, Indiana most of his childhood, but always spent the summers at Bass Lake, about a 2-hour drive away. During the winter months, his father worked as a glassblower. Summer shutdowns were normal in the glass industry at that time. The heat from the furnaces combined with summer weather made for extremely uncomfortable working conditions. Because of this, William Sr. moved his family to the lake for the summer, where they enjoyed the fresh country air and the simple life on water. It was during these summer months at Bass Lake that he spent most of his time at his shop building and designing various watercraft. He built a passenger boat at Lake Wawasee and operated a successful shuttle service for the various resorts that were there. Of course, summers were always spent at the lake, as he always loved sailing and boating. It was during these summers that his son, William D. Jackson, became interested in boating. He built his first boat in his father's boat shop in Winona at Bass Lake when he was 9. It was a rowboat fitted with a makeshift mast and a sail made of burlap. This first rowboat and the freedom he experienced on the lake ignited his passion for nautical design and engineering that would last for his entire life. In 1922, at the age of 16, he built his second boat, an 18-foot sailboat with a gaff-headed rig. During the 1920s, Winona at Bass Lake was a bustling little town with a bowling alley, silent movie theater, water park, school, several hotels, grocery stores, and taverns. In the mornings before school, Jackson began running trap lines to make money and would buy the occasional hunting and fishing magazine. When he was 19, he began to write how-to articles for some of these magazines, passing on some of the experiences he's learned while trapping. At the same time, his focus turned to designing and building small boats at his Bass Lake cottage. In 1935, at the age of 29, William, along with two friends, traveled from Chicago to New Orleans down the Illinois and Mississippi rivers. It took them 4 weeks in a 16-foot cabin sloop that he originally built for use on Bass Lake. Their journey was wrought with a multitude of problems, from engine breakdowns to water leaks in the bilge. Compounded with bad weather and the worst flooding in years, their trip down the Mississippi River proved to be the adventure of a lifetime. The boat was immediately sold upon their arrival, and with the money, he bought a Hudson and drove to Florida, where they spent the rest of the winter on dry land. It was during the 1930s that his boat designs and articles began to appear in Popular Science Monthly. He was listed as boating editor in the August 1936 edition of Outdoor Life and penned an article entitled "Clean Boats Give Better Service." William designed, built, and sold his boat plans to science and mechanics throughout the 1930s and 40s. In the early 1940s, he began designing his first ocean-going 24-foot sailboat. Working diligently in his shop for over 2 years, he dreamed of the day it would be ready for his exotic Caribbean adventure. Unfortunately, his seafaring ways were interrupted when World War II started, and his plans came to an abrupt end. Nevertheless, he named it Dolphin, and the drawings were published in a 1942 issue of Mechanics Illustrated. Soon after, he was drafted into the Army Air Corps' 922nd Crash Boat Company, and for the next few years, his life was focused on other things. His Army specialty was able seaman, and William was stationed at Thunderbolt, Georgia. His contingent patrolled areas offshore of the Atlantic 40 miles out, watching for airplanes in trouble, or that crashed in the ocean. Always the naval architect, he began to study the designs of the skiffs that were used to rescue the downed flyers and survivors from torpedoed ships. This wartime experience proved invaluable as he later incorporated this knowledge into his subsequent skiff designs. In the summer of 1943, while on patrol, he received a telegram that his mother was very ill. He rushed home to Bass Lake to be at her side, but it was too late. In May of 1944, he completed his service and was honorably discharged. William Jackson met his wife, Rosemary Flynn, at the Kingsbury Ordnance Plant where he worked after the war. Kingsbury at the time was a small town in northern Indiana and was the location of the facility that made munitions for the war. William and Rosemary were married in the fall of 1946. They went on a honeymoon cruise down the Mississippi River on a 24-foot motor sailboat that he had built before the war. Dolphin's name was changed to Gypsy, and the article and plans for this boat were published in the Boat Builder's Annual and a Science and Mechanics publication in 1950. In 1947, William and Rosemary bought a vacant lot at Bass Lake and a small cottage that was sitting across the road from their property. A friend helped them move the cottage with his tractor, skidding the building on massive logs to its new location. Since building materials were still scarce, they built an addition to the cottage and turned it into their home. About a month before the house was finished, their daughter, Joyce, was born. Joyce gave William and Rosemary a well-needed boost of energy to complete their new home. William then began construction of his boat shop next door to the house. It was here where he continued to work on his boat designs for the next 26 years and cemented his place in boat design history. In 1950, William began work on Starlight, a 27.5-foot auxiliary cruiser behind the boat shop. 2 years later, William, Rosemary, and their 5-year-old daughter Joyce journeyed down the Mississippi River to New Orleans on the new sailboat. When in New Orleans, William needed to make a few repairs to his boat. He decided at the same time to spruce up the paint and install the mast before they continued sailing across the Gulf of Mexico to Panama City, Florida. After many adventures and almost losing the sailboat in a hurricane at Tarpon Springs, Florida, William and Rosemary and Joyce came back home to Bass Lake. William spent the next 20 years designing and building boats for Science and Mechanics magazine, where he was boating editor for many years. His designs could also be found in Popular Mechanics, Outdoor Living Handbook, the Boat Builder's Annual, and home handyman. During that time, he also custom designed and built many different boats for his customers. Bill Verez was one such customer who came to know Jackson in the 1960s.
I lived in the nearby community of Knox, a distance of about 6 miles, and I spent my teenage years in and around Bass Lake. One summer, I decided to stop by Jackson's shop and introduce myself. I wanted to ask him some questions about a boat design he had done called the Sea Babe. It was that boat I wanted to build. After several visits and seeing my determination, he wondered if I would be interested in building an inboard runabout instead. He had already committed to designing and building the prototype, but was too busy with the other projects to work on this one. The deal was that he would supply most of the materials at cost, including a 101 horsepower converted Ford engine, and walk me through the steps. My end of the deal was to build the boat with his guidance and provide photos as the project progressed. These photos would then be used in the publication. For me, this was the experience of a lifetime. I quickly converted my dad's garage into a workshop, and the adventure began. The prototype turned out to be a huge success, and it was eventually published in the Science and Mechanics Boat Builder's Handbook. That's me driving the boat with my brother-in-law as a passenger. I launched it at Fishburn's Bass Lake Marina, and William photographed it on the water from a chase boat. While the boat was publicized as Riviera, I actually named it Susan Lynn after my daughter, who was born while I was building it. This project was a great experience, and although the boat is long gone now, the memory I have will live forever.
It was very important for William to design boats that the common man could build without any prior experience. The hallmark of any great design concept is to keep it simple, and William Jackson was a master, seamlessly blending together form and function. Perhaps the most important aspect of his design process was that his plans were easy to understand. The idea of using plywood instead of plank-on-frame construction appealed to the novice builder. Every design that came out of his shop was personally built and tested by William himself. The magazine articles always illustrated the finished vessel performing in the water, driven by himself or other family members, and almost always on Bass Lake. In 1964, William designed and built a 16-foot boat that he called the Sports Sled. A staff photographer from Popular Mechanics was invited to come out and photograph the craft for its publication. The photographer, the magazine's editor, and a model then made arrangements to come to Bass Lake from Chicago for the shoot. However, at the last moment, the model who was hired to pose with the boat was called away on another assignment. Never one to waste time during an opportune moment, William convinced his 16-year-old daughter Joyce to stand in for the shoot. Over the years, William D. Jackson produced and published hundreds of boat designs, ranging from small 8-foot seafleas to larger 30 to 40-foot cruisers.
My name is Art Inslee, and my dad built me this boat 1956. It's a Blitzen B utility runabout. It'll seat 4 people, and the original motor was a Mark 20. It's had a 20-horse Merc on it, and then finally this 40 horse. It'll do about 42 miles an hour, and it'll seat 4 people.
Well, what's your favorite part of your seaflea? Like favorite of seafleas in general?
Well, the fact that they're small and fast, maneuverable,
Yeah.
and there's lots of wind.
I love going fast in them, and all the spray just gets in your face and you're low to the water. It's different than a regular boat where you just like sit down and just drive, but this one you can go crazy, and it's a one-person boat, so it's more fun. And yeah, it's fun going fast.
In a letter to his friend Charles Galen, dated March 29, 1961, William wrote, "People are always worried about the bigness of boats and such, when if the truth were known, it's the minimum expense and maximum pleasure boats that count. At least they bring pleasure to the many, and, in my opinion, that is the only criterion worthwhile." William D. Jackson passed away at his home on Bass Lake on February 7, 1973. For over 50 years, he single-handedly changed the landscape fabric of the home boat building industry. A true Renaissance man at heart, he also designed and crafted beautiful furniture and was a reader of the classics, philosophy, and history. He very much enjoyed corresponding with family and friends with his many witty, interesting, and sometimes gently cynical letters. Now, over 40 years later, his legacy still lives on. As long as there are boats on the water, the need for speed and spray will always be there. Mark Twain said, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than those you did. So throw off the bowlines, sail away from safe harbor, catch the wind in your sails, explore, dream, discover.